Welcome to Colliers Talks, a podcast series featuring the latest trends, insights, research, and developments in commercial real estate in Canada and beyond.
Well, guys, welcome to another episode of Wine and Warehouses, or Warehouses and Wine, and whichever. I'm not sure today which is the better one, but I think we like talking about warehouses. We like talking about wine. And we're super stoked to have you here, Mr. Bates, Bill Bates.
Thanks so much for having me.
Excellent. With Prologis, Vice President, Investment Officer.
Yes, there's a badge.
There is a badge. Amazing.
You're not wearing it right now.
No,
Okay.
no, it's in the car.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I know you're a very busy man. You're covering a lot of territory in Canada and traveling quite a bit. And so we've been trying to get this podcast off the ground for a while, and so we're really happy to have you here. And
thank you.
so typically what we do is we open up a nice bottle of wine. It's very relaxed, very convivial, as we say in French, and we'll talk a little about the wine. And while we're drinking and sipping some great juice, we're going to talk about the market and there's a lot of changing things in the market right now. So we're very excited about hearing your views. And so just to get started, I'm Jean-Marc Dubé, Executive Vice President with Colliers, and my partner
Arnold Fox, Executive Vice President of Colliers as well.
All right, excellent. So guys, what I brought us today is a emergence, which I thought was a cool bottle to talk about. It's a Bon Premier Cru, Le Clos du Roi, which basically means the king's parcel. And usually that was reserved for the best parcel, obviously was kept for the king. And what's very cool about this wine is that it's made by a Québécois,
really?
Pascal Marchand, who immigrated to France in the 80s and has worked in many, many vineyards, fantastic winemaker. And he's partnered with another Canadian, Moritas, who you guys might know as a very successful real estate financier in Canada, and owns Taz Winery in Niagara. And so I thought this would be a really cool wine to try. So it's 100% Pinot Noir from Burgundy. Bill, I know you're a super big Italian guy.
I am, yeah.
You like Italian wines, but I thought we'd go a little bit out of your box and try this out. So brought us some really nice glasses, and I'll talk to you guys something about that in a second. But guys, cheers.
Cheers. Good to see you, Bill.
Likewise. Thanks for having me very much. Cheers, guys.
Oh, that's nice.
That's lovely. That's really
nice. It's a kind of wine you don't need a steak with.
Right.
To me, there's wines that you absolutely have to have food with. And, Beaune is typically a bit of a cooler region of Burgundy, so you get a little bit more acidity. It's a really, really nice drinking. And we're actually drinking out of fantastic glasses, Zalto glasses.
It's beautiful.
Hand blown in Austria. And I always like to bring a gadget on these podcasts. And Arnold, I'm not even sure. I was about to say what episode we are, but I don't even know where we are anymore. We've done a lot of these. We've always, and I always bring out a little gadget to try and talk about it. And so today, what I brought my case, which I actually carry glasses in. Okay, and it's not just for this podcast. There's some great restaurants that we like to go to, and not to sound like I hate the word wine snob, but the shape of the glass and it really makes a big difference.
I agree
on the taste of wine. So I typically will try and sometimes, if I know the restaurant has a great wine list, but maybe not the best stemware, I'll bring my own glasses. People get a good kick out of it. It does look like a secret agent's
tactical case.
A tactical case. So anyways, guys, again, really thank you for making the time to see us.
Pleasure.
So why don't you give us a bit of background on Prologis?
Sure. Oh boy, where do I begin? My favorite saying is, generally speaking to the public, we're the largest company you've never heard of. But simply put, we're the largest real estate company on the planet. Focused on industrial, own and manage about 1.3 billion square feet across the globe.
That's crazy.
Yeah. In terms of data points, I'm constantly flabbergasted by just the amount of resources, but also, frankly, the insights that you're able to pull from around the world and people that you're able to converse with about problem in Toronto that may have been rectified somewhere else, Brazil, the UK, parts of the US. But just in terms of other offshoots of our business, to give you some highlights, that scale represents anywhere between 4 to 5% of global GDP that flows through our warehouses. So generally speaking, if you've received a package, Prologis has had a hand in delivering it to your home. From a Canadian perspective, we're active in Toronto, obviously, have been so for just over 20 years. We've amassed a portfolio there just over 14 million square feet.
It's very large.
Yes. Yeah, I think it's...
Well, for a Canadian market, and you're starting to move outside, right, of Toronto.
Correct. We've recently opened an office in Vancouver. When I joined roughly 5 years ago, we were just kind of starting to reinvigorate discussions around what does the pan-Canadian strategy look like. Only took 4.5 years, but we finally found a building in Vancouver. Shout out to Colliers as well for helping us out with that acquisition. And recently hired a phenomenal partner out in Western Canada who's recently opened the office there and has got a pipeline that I'm constantly shocked by what he's been able to amass. So Vancouver is obviously a majorly important port of entry market for us, which is typical for part of our strategy. Coastal port-oriented cities are very, very much Prologis type markets. So yes, from a Canadian perspective, it's in Toronto, we're a decent size by Prologis standards, but I can say definitively that there's tons of room for growth there. And we look at Toronto and broadly speaking Canada as one of the key growth markets for us globally, which is really exciting.
And typically your assets are on the Class A industrial side. Am I correct in saying that?
Exclusively. I mean, unless there's, a covered land play or a vision for a longer term hold with some kind of evaluation to a higher and better use or redevelopment potential. Constantly in New York, New Jersey, for example, we're purchasing older assets and repurposing them. That might come with a shorter term lease, but generally speaking, in Toronto, exclusively like 99% Class A industrial.
And it's funny, I can attest to your global reach because Arnold and I were on business in Tokyo.
Yeah, right.
And I remember reaching out to you and saying, hey, can you get us to go check out one of your multi-story buildings in Tokyo? And so we were able to get in. We went to take a look at those buildings. I mean, pretty crazy. I think you guys have a multi-story building in New York. Am I wrong?
You're probably thinking of our facility out in Seattle.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So certainly have been evaluating multi-story pretty extensively in New York, New Jersey. But you're probably thinking of our, I think it's called Georgetown Crossing, if I'm not mistaken.
And it hasn't really taken off in Canada. I know they did one in Vancouver.
Yes.
I don't know how successful that has been. It's been looked at in Montreal, because of there's not much land left, as you know, in Montreal, especially on an island. So there's been some projects that have looked at trying to do some multi-level industrial, and it doesn't seem to have, the model doesn't seem to work yet in Canada.
I think it's a function of two things. Japan's a great example. You look at population density, that's probably one of the most densely packed markets you can look at. Infrastructure being strained, but also an intense customer service expectation. A little bit easier in Japan if you just look at the equipment that goes in and out of the facilities, shorter box trucks. So I'm assuming the facility that you guys toured was kind of the corkscrew.
Yeah, that's exactly what it was. On both sides. Yeah. Drive up in a corkscrew, go in, unload, drive down the other corkscrew.
Could you imagine a Canadian truck driver trying to with a 53-foot trailer with the sleeper on, trying to navigate that. Ice. Yeah, and some ice, right? So there's physical limitations, but also, if you look at, generally speaking, the sprawl, Toronto's a good example. We're approaching that density level, I think, but we're not there yet. There's still choice, right? You can go out a little bit further afield and pay conventional industrial rates versus a premium, because these facilities are not cheap to build, right? So
no, of course not.
I think it's service level, it's density, but it's also kind of physical limitations of infrastructure that's kind of limiting it.
All right. And what's Prologis looking at Canada now? How does the company view Canada? Are you stable? Are you looking to grow within the country?
I mean, as mentioned, we're very pro growth in certain key markets in Canada. Obviously, Vancouver and Toronto, where we currently are. I think that there's a symbiotic relationship between Vancouver and Calgary. In short, because Vancouver is full most of the time,
Right?
But also just from a product offering in terms of cost and value, I think Calgary represents a really interesting market. And I mean, if you look at the stats, I mean, Calgary's performing really, really well.
Yeah, they are doing very well.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, look, their rates did not climb as high as everybody else
Correct.
did over
Correct.
the last 5 years. So that obviously they've had some catching up to do. But I think they're, when I talk to our colleagues in our Calgary office, they're pretty bullish on the industrial market there.
I think so, and it's really turning into a regional distribution hub. If you think about drive time from Calgary, you can get all the way, really into Winnipeg and Ontario. You can't do that from Vancouver.
Right.
Right. So there's a logistics component, there's a value component, but also in terms of choice, port of entry, into Alberta, it's actually more efficient to come out of Prince Rupert, right, and usually less congestion at the port. So some choice there, I think, is good. As you move east in Toronto, the last 5 years or so, we've amassed a development pipeline of around 6 million square feet.
Okay.
So in relatively short order, we're going to be roughly a 20 million square foot business. We haven't had a lot of leasing success there recently amidst some of the headwinds that we're facing. So I would say that in Toronto, that's the concentration of where, on an aggregate basis, the most growth will come from. And here in Montreal, I mean, I believe that there is a symbiotic relationship between the Ontario and the Quebec market as well, similar, but maybe not as pronounced as Vancouver and Calgary. But in Montreal, I mean, it's land constrained, it's
Right.
an island, it's a port of entry. It talks about trade diversification into Europe. I think this market can and should be a benefactor of that. But also the age of inventory in this marketplace, which we've talked a lot about, right? So I think those are the key markets that, we're going to be focusing on for years to come. And overall, just generally bullish on growth in general for Canada. And a few of the metrics that we look at is obviously population growth, but also kind of, flow of goods and services, right? And we see Canada as very stable and very, I would say, steady and resilient from a demand perspective. So, I think it has all the trappings for growth, really, from Prologis' perspective.
So we've done a little bit of business with you guys. In Montreal, we're working with you guys.
Yep.
I think you've done quite a bit of business with Colliers across the
Absolutely.
country.
Yeah.
When you are, and your team that I've had the chance to interact with, and so is Arnold, but very analytical.
Yes.
You guys are very data driven. So when you're approaching a new market like Montreal, like what are the driving factors for you?
I mean, some of them I reference, right? I think in Montreal, you've got this really cool concentration of population density, land constrained conditions. I think Montreal's a little different too, because you have, global, but also local and regional business that, for example, there's probably several companies that you can rhyme off that have a Quebec headquarters, but they do business perhaps into Ontario and nationally, right? So I think that is an important factor. We pay very close attention to age of inventory, quality of product that's being offered. And really what we're looking for is an avenue to create value. So in other words, do we want to be just another landlord that buys existing buildings and white boxes them or does a leasing program to create value? Maybe as part of a strategy, but that's never going to be the full strategy. So in a sense, we feel very strongly that our product and our service offering would be well received here in Montreal.
No, I think so. I really do, because we actually have right now a lack of Class A product.
Right.
And the Class A product that is being built is being leased. So that goes to show that there is a big flight to quality from industrial users. Mm-hmm. So I think that there's, in my humble opinion, there's a lot of room for Prologis to.
I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Appreciate that very much.
So one of the things that we're seeing, especially now we're talking about Class A buildings, is environmentally friendly buildings, zero net carbon, net zero. How is Prologis approaching that in today's market?
I would say it's very top of mind in everything that we do. It's kind of interesting doing this podcast in plus 100-year-old wood building. I believe that was catered towards the textile business. Which,
that's exactly what it was,
yeah,
Dominion Textiles.
That's right. I find it fascinating because as I walked in here, I got kind of flashbacks to a building we just constructed known as Prologis Evergreen in Brampton. And we did a 250,000 square foot facility made out of cross-laminated timber, roof deck, columns, and beams. Columns, yeah. Yeah, it's a really fascinating project.
This is industrial.
This is industrial, right? Wow. Yeah, it's a Class A industrial facility, 36-foot clear. Frankly, in a time period where we didn't have to really kind of go outside of the box from a sustainability or a spec perspective, we decided to, right? And that's part of what I love about the DNA of this company is, just because you don't have to do something, is not a good reason to innovate or try.
That's really cool. And I'll tell you a quick anecdote. We just launched a project with Rosefellow in Laval.
Yep.
Where we did the whole facade is done in beams, wood beams.
Oh, really?
Wood. It's really spectacular. And somebody reached out to me and said, is it just the facade and the office portion that's done in wood, or is it the entire building? Mm-hmm. And I almost giggled and said, well, come on, you can't be doing an entire building in wood.
I'll give you a tour.
Well, I think I'm going to hold you to that because that's
sure.
Unbelievable.
Yeah, and really, I think all told, it represents, roughly speaking, about 50% reduction in embodied carbon in the shell of the building. And, that's enough power to, enough carbon reduction to take, a couple hundred cars off the 401, on a monthly basis. Right. So from my perspective, we're trying to attack the things that really have the biggest movement first, right? So you think of steel, you think of concrete, and so we're always tinkering and innovating, but that's, I would say, one of the biggest, if not the biggest, swings that we've ever taken in terms of the shell of a facility. And I'm super proud to say that it happened here in Canada, right? And, a lot of the timber came actually from this province, sustainable managed forestry. And I think it's one of the coolest facilities I've ever been in. And it certainly doesn't, it obviously gives you the vibes of a modern logistics facility with the doors and kind of the bay sizing and all the rest of it. But you look around and you look at this facility and you go, man, what's old is new again, right? And I think the thing I'm most intrigued by is, how is it going to benefit our customers, right? I think the sustainability story is an awesome one, and we absolutely should be taking those types of swings, as I say. But, is there a potential savings from an operating cost perspective, right? The insulation value of this facility is better, right? The look and feel, right, is better, and it feels brighter, more inviting, which sounds weird to talk about when it comes to an industrial facility.
It almost sounds like a loft-style industrial building.
Correct.
Right.
Correct. Yeah.
But one that actually is utilitarian, that can be completely used by a Class A 3PL.
Absolutely. Right.
How did the market react to that type of building?
I think from the beginning there was just this fascination with the why, and there was an initial flurry of interest, just in terms of to see it, right, and kind of understand some of the major questions that we were getting, right, from a market perspective. A lot of them came around fire suppression, things like mold, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, fire suppression is actually better than steel, right? The R value is another thing that we talked about. It's all mold resistant, using environmentally friendly treatment of all of the timber, right? So no one had done it before. But eventually we got around to, completing the facility, getting it enclosed. Then the tour started, and, touch wood, we're actually getting close to completing a deal soon. Yeah. So,
what was the cost like on that?
It was definitely a premium, right? At the time, which is going back 2 or 3 years. Like, this is an innovation. We're expecting a market-driven deal. Yes, there's a percentage premium attached to it, but it's not egregious in any way.
Yeah, I think the same thing our experience has been. Everybody loves the ESG principles and really, but when it comes down to paying for it, you have to educate. You have to,
Right.
show the user. Some of the larger Fortune 500 companies that have it as part of their business operations, they understand that. But
Right.
your typical industrial user, we've worked with carbon net zero buildings, and you have to really show them what those savings are, and especially on energy consumption and that. So I think it's an education, but it long term, it's the direction that everybody's going in. So.
Absolutely. And I think it's really well said. I look at that as somewhat of the price of innovation is the education piece.
Right.
And let's be honest. I mean, the market, when we delivered this building into last year, completed it, the market wasn't fantastic, right? So, that being said, the interest in the product was super, super strong, right? So I think we're onto something, and the response has been like phenomenal, kind of since this last resurgence we've had in Toronto from
Right.
a demand perspective. Yeah.
Well, it's interesting that it's a good segue because I thought we could chat a little bit about the market today, especially since that you have a national exposure and that you see a lot. We see a smaller micro market within a larger market. You get to see it all. So, but I think we might need a little bit of a sip before we start talking about the market in Canada right now. So
Sure.
Let's see how it's evolved.
Sure.
We like to call this the breakfast wine.
The breakfast wine. I like that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's very nice.
Boy, nice.
Very, very nice. I actually had the opportunity twice to visit this vineyard.
Of course you
And
have.
and Pascal Marchand and his lovely wife cooked us lunch in
No
their
way.
yeah, it was very so I find that I don't know about you guys, we've all visited wineries, and I think it's a good opportunity because Bill and I have, Arnold, I think you probably know this, but Bill and I have had a couple of glasses of wine together over the time that we've known each other.
Yep.
And Bill introduced me to what's arguably become one of my favorite restaurants in Toronto because of their 70,000 bottle
I
list.
think it's around there.
Yeah, no, it's
Yeah.
it's which your lovely friend sommelier runs from an Excel sheet.
She does, yeah. So I guess shout out to Wendy Votto, one of my favorite people, just in general. But yeah, she's been really an institution at Via Allegro, the restaurant,
Right.
that has been for me just. I kind of started going there. It's a kind of a known lunch spot in and around the industrial areas that we all kind of know in Toronto. But also just a phenomenal service level, but
Yeah.
great place to just kind of go and enjoy lunch. So I got to know Wendy, got to know a little bit more about her expertise, and I mean she might be maybe the most well-known sommelier in Canada. I don't want to overstate
Listen,
it, but
I was blown away. I
Were
was
you?
absolutely blown away.
We're just
just
saying a
by
lot, right?
by her knowledge of even just her knowledge of her own inventory.
yes, yeah.
Crazy stuff, and the stuff that they've been able to collect. We had gone in just to have a 5 à 7 a happy hour drink, and
That's dangerous.
next
Yes.
thing you know, I'm staying for dinner, and it was a great evening. So. Why don't we chat a little bit about the market? I think right now there's a lot happening in Canada. We've come off. You mentioned before last year was a tough year. I think 24, even with the interest rates, and especially in Montreal, were tough.
Yep.
We don't have a lot of development pipeline in Montreal. I think that's true of a lot of markets. I know Toronto had a little bit more that had already been started, but where do you see us going right now, given some of the economic and political situation that we're in?
I think the way I would describe it is demand resilience. We've been having more conversations about what the future of Toronto and the holdings of our customers and really their supply chain kind of hopes and dreams for Canada. We've been having more of those conversations than I would say ever before. So we've really doubled down on communication, which is a very Prologis thing. I can say with certainty that there is really little to no impact on a long-term basis to the economic outlook or thought process around Toronto, more broadly speaking, Canada. Pockets of demand obviously are different depending on which market you're in, but I can say definitively that our customers are still pro keeping their space in and around Toronto, and as I said, broadly speaking, in Canada. There really, I think, is you have to go industry by industry right now. In Ontario, obviously, the automotive sector, one of the most heavily impacted, right? Of
course.
Here in Quebec, aluminum, right? And if you go west, it's more on the lumber side.
Yeah.
But broadly, in terms of a Prologis global perspective, very little in terms of any pullback in terms of demand on a long enough timeline. Certainly, there's headwinds that we have to not navigate, and there's definitely challenges. I'm not trying to paint the rosiest possible picture, but the stats that I can quote pretty easily in Toronto, because that's where I am. Lowest supply pipeline in approaching a decade.
Right.
Demand has really started to turn back on. We've officially had 2 quarters, consecutive quarters of positive absorption. We'd like to see obviously more velocity around leasing, but it's not that long before you start to see the supply-demand equilibrium start to tip again. So I think, in my view, let's see what this summer brings in terms of negotiations around a trade deal. But It feels like a lot of our customers are patiently awaiting some stability and direction in terms of what the U.S.-Canada situation is going to look like.
Yeah, I think we've seen a lot of that also in our market and even across the board, where people are just, they are on the sidelines just waiting to see what happens. Although that was, I think, really 2025.
Yep.
2026, our customers are starting to say, we cannot wait anymore. We have a business.
This is it.
We have a business to run.
Yep.
We're going to have to make decisions, and we're just going to have to make decisions and live with whatever those consequences are, because there's just a penalty to the business to be doing nothing, right?
Agreed.
So I think we're seeing that. I don't know if you're going to agree with this statement. I think we're at the bottom of the market. If we're not at the bottom, I think we are absolutely scraping the bottom. In our market, we've seen more stability now. Yep. So I think we're seeing more demand. The last 2 quarters, we're starting to see more deals, not only demand from third-party logistics companies, we're starting to see deals actually getting done.
Yeah.
Which is, we had 2025, there were not, until probably November, December, there really were not a lot of transactions done in our market. And I think that's pretty true nationally also.
I think so.
But do you see this year a turnaround, or is this a transition year?
I think what you said is predominantly true. It feels like we're at or near the bottom. Whether we're scraping it or not, we'll see. But I think as I just rhymed off a few stats, right? I mean, positive absorption returning in Toronto, Vancouver, for all intents and purposes, filling up again, and transactions really have not totally slowed down. It's just been a little bit of rental decline. Calgary, we've already said, hasn't really missed a beat, right? I see in terms of Montreal, the amount of rental decline has decelerated, right?
Yeah, look, we think it's actually stabilized now.
Okay.
We don't think that we're going to see a lot more decline in the rents, if anything. And I think one of the things that's really unique about Montreal, though, is that a lot of the decline that we've had has not been necessarily because rental rates, landlords are slashing rental rates. It's because a lot of our Class A buildings have been rented. So, and as you mentioned before about age of inventory, our inventory is an older inventory in Montreal. So you start taking out those Class A buildings that are renting for $16 to $18.
Yep.
You end up with the B class or even C class buildings that are in that $12 to $14, and it's going to drastically affect your your average asking rates without really having a replacement for that Class A coming to the market.
Exactly right. And this actually is a really good point, broadly speaking, just in terms of, I think, as an industry, we can start slicing up asset classes a little bit better, right?
Good point.
We've seen certainly pricing in Ontario vary greatly depending on which submarket you're looking in, but also just the quality of the asset, right? So, for example, we developed to a 42-foot clear standard in a region called Halton Hills in Ontario, and recently we were first to lease up. We created some alpha relative to the balance of the market. So the spread to our next competitor was over $1, right? So I like the fact that product quality matters and that market matters, because you can start figuring out how to price certain markets so that you can, with more conviction, start to deliver product in markets that make sense. Now, of course, you have to find land at the right price and all the rest of it, but I think it's a very, very healthy aspect of our market that we're starting to see that segmentation, like I said, both on location and on product quality. And it sounds like that's happening here.
It is. It is. So you mentioned something I'd like to touch on, land pricing. So as a developer, because you're not only a landlord, you're also a developer where you'll buy green, brown pieces of land, build up your own buildings. I know you typically like to build large campus style portfolio. How hard is it to acquire land today? Even just from a price availability, debt. How is debt on land? I know it's gotten better, but it's still not where we were 5 years ago.
Zoning as well.
Zoning, yeah. So kind of in rank ordering, I would say that entitlements is the single biggest challenge that we have internally in terms of wrapping our head around what is the amount of time it takes to entitle a piece of land in Toronto versus Montreal versus Calgary versus Vancouver. Candidly speaking, we know it's all bad, right? But it's a function of what are we underwriting, right? How long is our hold period? And a lot of that is then directed towards the ultimate seller of land and trying to help them understand that it's not that we're trying to steal something from you, because everyone saw the peak COVID price. They got a stack of offers on their desk, but that just doesn't exist anymore. So I think in general, to answer your question, it's very difficult to purchase land these days. For us, I think what would move the needle on a land purchase would be attaching a customer build-a-suit to it, because that's obviously de-risking, but also the ability to service your customer in either an existing or a new market in Canada is a very attractive prospect for us. But in general, I'd say entitlements, the education piece, as I mentioned, on the seller side is just, we're constantly kind of spinning our wheels with opportunities, and we're grateful for brokers that bring us the opportunities, but we're being a little bit more, I would say, front-ended on our diligence as it relates to whether or not we're even going to entertain a parcel these days, just because we don't want to go in and offend anyone or go through a process that just is not going to bear fruit in terms of an acquisition. So from our perspective, I think those are the main priorities that we're focused on. On the debt side, fortunately for me, that's not a part of my business for now, just based on the size and scale of our organization, which I'm grateful for. But in general, it's, moving around kind of the circles in Toronto around debt and just our friendly competitors where we're having conversations, it's very difficult to entitle land and apply appropriate amount of debt and really to make a pro forma make sense. So I think that the proof is really in the amount of transactions, which is virtually zero. Right. So,
and that's pretty much across the board, I believe, right? It's not just Toronto, Montreal. I mean, Vancouver, I don't think they have any land left to build.
I think that's predominantly true. Although my colleague would probably have a little something to say about that. Right. And he's proven that out. But I think you're absolutely right. I mean, just ask any of your land colleagues, kind of what kind of year they've had in the last 2-3 years, and I would say it's probably more advisory and advocation type work as opposed to transactional, if that makes sense.
We mentioned before that demand is coming back, and I would agree with that statement. Where's that demand coming from? Like, what type of users, occupiers are you seeing in the market right now?
What I'm grateful for is 3PLs are back.
For sure.
On a global scale, some new entrants to the market, in particular from China, that have transacted across Canada, which is a growing segment. The who's who in the global 3PL world, all of which are on our customer list, are active again, it seems like, across most of the major markets in Canada. Food and beverage is performing pretty well across North America. And I would say those are probably the two biggest categories that are really driving us forward. But predominantly, it's the 3PLs that are back.
Are you guys doing a lot of cold storage?
Yeah, in Canada, not a lot. We have purpose-built facilities for some of the largest food distribution firms that you can think of. But generally speaking, it's not something that we would ever build on spec because it's such a specialized use. I
agree.
Right? So what we find is, we buy a site, entitle it, get ready to build, and generally speaking, one of our 6,500 customers calls us up and says, hey, we want to lease that. So it's kind of like a bit of a chicken and an egg thing where it feels like we're trailing that business a little bit, but it's not something we focus on,
right?
I would say.
Yeah, we're not seeing. We get a lot of questions about it from different landlords and developers, but I think everybody knows that it's very specialized. But
totally,
but I agree with you that the three here in Montreal also it's the same thing. The 3PLs and FNB is definitely very active. So. One thing I always like to ask our guests, and I'm asking if we use your crystal ball, but
sure.
We're looking now, let's say 2 to 5 years in the future. Where do you? We're talking about nation building projects.
Yep.
We have a government that's trying to push Canada to other customers globally, which may benefit your organization also, given your reach. Where do you see Canada in the industrial market over that time period?
Well, I think it's safe to say that the intense growth that we experienced over COVID is, those days are behind us. I like the phrase resilient demand, which gives me confidence to say that I think we're going to see some sustained growth, right? It may not be 15 to 20% a year, which we saw here in Montreal and to a lesser extent in Toronto. But, is 3 to 5% reasonable? On a long enough timeline as you get into 3, 4, 5 years from now? I think it is, right? I think it will take some conviction. Clearly, there's a flight to quality.
Yeah.
In no small part because, let's just be real about what the main factors are for our customers. Power is now superseding, to a certain extent, labor. Location, as we said. That kind of product differentiation based on asset quality, but also location is hugely important. So gone are the days of this homogenous, $20 a foot for everything, small bay, big bay, no matter where you are located. And I think that is a very healthy thing for our business. So I think provided we can turn on the spec machine a little bit in our key markets across Canada, you're going to see some sustained growth, I think.
It's great. And it's funny what you just said about the power. We were at a conference in San Antonio, and I heard this key phrase that says, power is the new labor. Yep. And it's absolutely true because even our 3PL clients are looking now to have power because of automation, because of robotics. So it's going to be an interesting next couple of years. And I share your sentiment. I'm optimistic. I'm not sure I'm bullish just yet. I am definitely optimistic. I think that we're going to end up this year stable. I think we're going to end up in the same type of demand level that we're at. I think 2027 is going to be a bit of a different market in a positive way. So
like a rebound year, if you will.
I think so. Yeah. I think so. And because all the stuff that we're talking about investing in energy and critical minerals and all the resources that we have in Canada. I mean, frankly, we have what the world wants.
I agree.
Right. So, but that's going to take some time. So we'll keep our fingers crossed that that we've got some good leadership that helps us out on that one. So
I agree.
Yeah.
Well, and to your point, if we can get out of our own way,
yes,
right, from a regulatory perspective, and for the record, not an advocate for kind of shirking responsibilities on the sustainability side, but I think that there is a level of reasonableness in terms of checks and balances that we have to take an honest look at internally in Canada.
Well, it's interesting you say that because I listened to a podcast with the governor of Pennsylvania.
Right.
And he said, to your point before where we were talking about land, and you said that one of the biggest challenges are entitlements.
Mm-hmm.
And that was the same in Pennsylvania. And
Right.
they came in and put in programs to shrink that from what would have been years to a couple of months.
Right.
And they are on fire right now because of that on the industrial side. So I think the best thing you said is we have to learn to get out of our own way.
Yeah.
And I think that's coming.
Speed to market.
Speed to market.
Right. And that's deal certainty around speed. We talked about power, we talked about labor, we talked about location, but certainty around the project in and of itself is a selling feature.
Absolutely.
Which is a uniquely Canadian thing, right? It's it's not always a field of dreams, build it and they will come type strategy. We talked about that segmentation, but in the end, I mean, this is in part what gives us conviction to continuously build. Because we believe in our product and we have got conviction around our customer base around the world, but also we've just seen, when you are executing on a project, you're moving dirt, you're going vertical with steel. Generally speaking, you start to get interest, right? And it becomes palpable and becomes a project, and that's usually where the magic happens.
Amazing. Well, thanks again for making the trip, for coming to see us
Pleasure.
in La Belle Province
Yes.
in Montreal. And I know you're a big supporter of our market, so we
yeah.
appreciate that and look forward to you guys doing your first transaction here. So cheers, guys.
Cheers. Sincere pleasure.
Yeah.
Thanks very much.
Thanks for listening to Colliers Talks podcast. To learn more about Colliers Canada, our experts, and our solutions, visit collierscanada.com or find us on LinkedIn, Twitter, and Facebook.